Every year in the NFL, it never fails. There's that one team or two teams that go into the season with really high expectations and they just completely and totally implode. Nobody ever thinks it's going to be their team. Nobody ever wants it to be their team. But every year it happens. And in 2013, the team that easily fit into that category was the Houston Texans. Here's a team coming off of a couple of playoff appearances. Here's a team that people thought more of the same for them in 2013. And then they go 2-14. And I said in my Jacksonville Jaguars preview that the Jags finished last in the AFC South. And I apologize for that because that, of course, wasn't correct. They finished third in the AFC South because it was the Houston Texans that brought up the butt-naked rear of the division, going 2-14, just really caving, falling apart in so many different ways, and ending up with the number one overall selection in the draft. So you knew some changes were going to come. You know, Kubiak was fired before the season even ended, and frankly, it was probably time for him to go. So in comes from Penn State, Bill O'Brien to be the new man in charge. And, you know, a lot of people had this debate in the offseason, and it will be a debate for years to come, whether or not Bill O'Brien was the right guy for the job and whether or not the Houston Texans went about shaking things up the right way in order to maybe rebound and have a nice bounce-back season in 2014. With the number one overall selection, obviously, I think their biggest addition, other than maybe their head coach Bill O'Brien in the offseason, was Jadeveon Clowney from South Carolina. Here's a guy with freakish athleticism. Here is a guy with explosive playmaking ability who also has those moments, frankly, where he does concern you. I don't care how any pro-Clowney camp tries to spin it. He has those moments where his effort was less than 100%. He has those moments where he disappears for periods of games. He also shows that ability to completely take over and dominate games and impose his will like few defensive prospects I've seen over the past 25 years. They also brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick to be their new kind of, I guess you'd say, bridge quarterback since they got rid of Matt Schaub. They also lost Ben Tate in the offseason. He went to the Cleveland Browns. They cut Owen Daniels. I actually thought the Houston Texans, frankly, were going to be busier in the offseason. You know, you could sit there and say they still have some talent in place. They have a nice nucleus in some areas, and that's not necessarily false. But at the end of the day, the team still went 2-14. 2-14. If your team goes 2-14, that means you probably had huge issues at quarterback, which the Texans did in 2013, and they decided to address that with Ryan Fitzpatrick. They had other issues, and they decided to allow Ben Tate to leave, and they really didn't get that active in free agency. I'm not necessarily saying that's a wrong thing to do or the right thing to do. It's just, it surprised me a little bit. Now, heading into 2014, I look at the Houston Texans. You know, I talk about certain teams, their strength is their head coach, or their strength is their quarterback, or their head coach and or quarterback. To me, the biggest strength of the Houston Texans is J.J. Watt. He's almost too good. He almost should be illegal. He is literally like two players on the field every single time. It is like if the Houston Texans had a better core around him, they could be playing 12 against 11. That's how much of a difference maker J.J. Watt is. That's how much of a beast he is, which is all the more impressive in the fact that he plays a 3-4 defensive end. So that's not a position where somebody like a J.J. Watt should be able to make the amount of big plays that he does, but he does. He is just dominant. And when you have that building block on your defense, man, it makes it a lot easier to have your unit be respectable in a great big hurry. And even though Gary Kubiak is gone, I still think some of the infrastructure is in place for the Texans to still have a solid running game. They still have Arian Foster. Yes, they don't have Ben Tate, but, you know, somebody else will step up to the plate, whether that's a Jonathan Grimes or what have you. But I think this is still a Houston Texans team that's going to be able to run the ball. I still like what they have on the outside at wide receiver with Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins, and then guys like Martin and Posey as well. They have a better receiving core than they've had in years past, especially. But question marks for this team, there's quite a few for me. Ryan Fitzpatrick. You decided that you were going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick for the time being. You decided you were going to wait till the 4th round to draft a quarterback and make it Tom Savage, a guy who's already 25 years old at that. You know, quarterback wasn't the only issue for the Houston Texans in 2014. There's just no freaking way. Or 2013. There's just no way, and it wasn't. But it was an issue. and you decided to address that issue by getting Matt Schaub out of town and replacing him with Ryan Fitzpatrick. That concerns me a little bit, and I'm not 100% sold on Fitzpatrick's schematic fit in what Bill O'Brien would want to do on offense. I'm not saying it couldn't work. I'm not saying that Fitzpatrick couldn't be productive and it couldn't be a good situation in 2014, but I have questions about it. I also have questions about that offensive line. Like I said, it wasn't just the quarterback play that contributed to the Texans' 2-14 season last year. The offensive line and pass protection in particular was terrible. Whether it was Matt Schaub, Case Keenum, didn't matter. Those guys seem to be consistently under siege. You got to be able to protect your quarterback better. In terms of their defense, they have some big pieces. Obviously, J.J. Watt. If Brian Cushing comes back healthy from his latest injury, then he has star ability. They have a guy like a Davion Clowney, who they drafted #1 overall. They're expecting to come in and be a big-time star. I'm not that sold on their secondary, in particular their safeties. I don't think their linebacking core is all that special. I have quite a number of questions, actually, about this Texans team. Looking ahead at their schedule for 2014, they've got the AFC North, the NFC East, and then their AFC conference games, they've got Buffalo and Oakland. So the schedule makers, based off of their last place finish, did do them at least a little bit of favor there. Some of their keys to success for 2014, obviously Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be key. And if he doesn't play well from the beginning and they end up going, let's say, with Case Keenum or, God forbid, even a Tom Savage, they need somebody to play well at the quarterback position. They need a guy that can at least make some big plays and not shoot the team in the foot so often like a Matt Schaub was prone to do. They need Arian Foster to stay healthy. While I think Jonathan Grimes might be a bit of a surprise as a backup running back, I don't quite think he has the same skill set of, let's say, a Ben Tate. With Ben Tate gone, if Foster goes down, that's a huge hole to fill in that Texans offense, and it really puts a lot more burden on Ryan Fitzpatrick. They need Clowney to play like the #1 overall pick. Ultimately, you didn't take a quarterback in the first round. You waited until the fourth round to take one. You took a defensive player, and in particular, a guy whose fit could be questionable in the 3-4 as an outside linebacker long term. You took this guy #1 overall. You need him to play like the #1 overall pick because you need him on the other side of J.J. Watt to be able to open up things for a J.J. Watt by making opposing offenses go, what the hell are we going to do? We got Watt coming this way and we got Clowney coming this way. They need this defense in general to play better. They need this defense to play like they had a couple of years before. Ultimately, I do expect the Houston Texans to be improved. They were not a Super Bowl contender the past couple of years. But at the same point in time, I also don't think they were 2-14 bad. Sometimes that just happens. It's bad luck, it's bad timing, it's bad situations, it's bad circumstances, bad plays. All those things can contribute to disappointment. And no question, the Texans were very disappointing in 2013, But 2014, you're looking at a team. I like their wide receiving core. I like their running game. I think their offensive line will be a little improved. I think their defense will be a little bit improved. And I don't think Fitzpatrick could be any worse than what they had in Schaub or Keenum last year at quarterback. I think this is a Texans team that will rebound, will find themselves in the mix in the AFC wildcard picture all year long. I'd expect them to at least win 8 games, probably even 9. So maybe go 9-7 and finish second in the AFC South. I still think they're a bit of ways away. I think at some point in time they are going to have to find what they've never truly had, which is that long-term answer at the quarterback position. But I do think better things are ahead in 2014 for the Texans compared to last season. God, you would have to think they would have no choice but to be better.